Hey everyone, I'm John, and today I want to talk about how I think you should teach yourself to code. Now, before we jump into this, I just want to kind of talk about my background, especially for my journey of becoming a software engineer and then eventually a program manager. In high school, I started my programming journey. I actually wrote my first line of code when I was a little bit younger, but I wasn't really interested in computers for programming, but more for video games. In high school, I would take business web page design classes. This got me introduced to like HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. But this was more or less just like building HTML and CSS web pages for businesses. It wasn't until I took a class in I think my junior or sophomore year of high school, which was a Visual Basic class, actually teaching you how to program. And more or less, this was a class that wasn't really taught by a teacher, it was taught by a book. The teacher was really just there to facilitate the lessons and try to follow along as best as they could. And a lot of students failed in this class. But for some reason, this class really stood out to me, and it's actually one of my favorite classes I took. So after I took that class, my high school didn't actually offer any more kind of like computer science or programming classes, so I had to do a lot of this by myself. And I got really interested in mobile app development, so I'd read books whenever I had some spare time. Although I couldn't afford an iPhone at the time, I would program Android apps, even though I didn't even have an Android device. I had a Windows phone. The point of this video isn't to just talk about all of my past, especially with programming, but it's to kind of show you that you're always going to be teaching yourself. After high school, I chose to go to college to get a 4-year degree in 3 years. And because I chose computer science as my major, I actually learned quite a bit. And the pattern is this: the things that you learn previously aren't always applicable to what you need to know currently. So when I was learning about mobile app development back in high school, I actually never really used it until after college. So one thing I want to talk about today is kind of my thoughts on boot camps, college, and self-taught. Now let's start with college because we just talked about it. College is typically a 4-year investment, and you're going to learn a lot of things that aren't necessarily related to what you're going to be ultimately doing. So you're going to learn about things that you might not even care about long term, or you might find a passion for them later in life. For me, these were like the soft sciences and also the humanities. Like I really like music, I really like the idea of anthropology, a lot of these other different things, but I didn't really need to know them at the beginning of my career. In college, you typically have about 2 years for your associate's degree, and this is where you're mostly learning generals. And generals are kind of like a rounded education of learning a little bit about everything. So you're gonna have basic maths, you're gonna have basic sciences, basic humanities, and so on. And this to me is actually one of the points where I think most people drop out. They actually don't really find passion for all those different topics, or they find it kind of like tedious and why do I need to learn this? So after you do your 2 years, you usually get into your actual major. And this is where I think the passion or the fun begins. For me, it was computer science. So I had a few basic programming courses and computer science courses on my belt because of my generals. But then when we go into the actual electives and the things that actually you want to be doing with your degree, it becomes fun. So this is where I actually took like mobile programming and like AI and all these other different types of classes that were really interesting to me at the time. But even graduating after 3 years, all it was a degree. It was a piece of paper that said that I knew how to learn. Now don't get me wrong, I'm really privileged to have that piece of paper, and also that piece of paper has got me opportunities that I don't think it would have if I didn't have it. But I think that there is a new modern way, and I actually saw this when I first started going to school. I was a part of a lot of startup communities, and a lot of startup communities would drop out of school to pursue startups. They would just drop out completely. They wouldn't even need a boot camp or anything similar. They would just learn as they need it. And to me, these are like two different learning modes. You have just in time when you need it, and you have ahead of time before you need it. But let's talk about boot camps, because I think boot camps are a little bit more in that just-in-time category. Now, a boot camp is really simple. You're going to pay a certain amount of money, or you're going to have some type of like income share agreement, and you're going to get in exchange an education in 3 months or something around there. These boot camps will teach you the practical skills, how to use a framework, how to build an app for iOS, how to build a website. These are the practical skills that you can use in everyday life. What they don't teach you though is how to teach yourself. They don't teach you what college teaches you, which is those long hours of how to study and how to test yourself to, be competent in an area. And these are just two different methods. One is more of a testing method, which is kind of college, and the other one is more of a project-based learning method, which is more like boot camps. But there is a third way, self-taught. And this is personally my favorite way. After being out of school for over 7 years, self-taught is the only way to keep your skills relevant, and also it's the way that you grow and get promoted and things like that. Nobody's going to teach you how to be self-taught though. You have to teach yourself. But self-taught is actually really hard. And the reason why is because most people don't have a plan. They're usually wandering aimlessly. Or they'll enroll into a school to tell them exactly what they need to learn so that they can get the job or get the opportunity that they want. But I think that there's a better way. I believe you need to start out with some goals. And those goals are going to be like an end journey. You're going to get a job or not. And inside those goals, you need to have outcomes of what are the milestones along the way to understand that you're making progress. So like an outcome might be that you get a job interview. And last but not least, I think this is the most important part, is that you need to have a routine and you need to have actions and behaviors that support that goal. This can be like identity-based habits or just a routine that really shapes of who the future you want. So you need to start thinking to yourself, if my goal is to be a web developer, what are the habits or behaviors that a web developer has every single day? And you might start to brainstorm a lot of different thoughts like, okay, well, web developers probably need to learn new technology, so they're always learning. So one habit might be to learn for 30 minutes every single day. But then you also might think of other things too, like the meta skills that a web developer might have. Well, a web developer is really fast at typing, or they can do things efficiently. So one skill that you might go out to learn or to build a habit of is learning to type fast. I know that these are only a few examples, but this is kind of how I think with regards to my goals, my outcomes, and also kind of my behavior. And the reason being is that no one's going to tell you what you need to do. The only person who will tell you what you need to do is you. And so like every single one of these options, college, boot camps, self-taught, they all have merit. There's going to be many opinions on them, there's a lot of pros and cons, but you got to find what ultimately makes you work best. The college experience and learning in college is something I would never replace in my life. I actually really enjoyed my 3 years at college. But I've also taught boot camps before too, and I don't necessarily know that there is a one-size-fit-all approach. The one thing I do know, however, is that everyone, regardless of if you go to college or if you attend a boot camp, they'll eventually become self-taught. That's because our job as programmers is to learn. And I want to rephrase that really quick. Our job is to learn. Our job is to take problems and find solutions. And the best way to do that is by researching and learning. And there's that famous Einstein quote of, if you know what you're doing when you're researching, you're not learning. So I hope that this video will help you, especially with your goals in mind. Just know that there's going to be a lot of advice out there, and you need to choose and make the decision for yourself. Don't let other people tell you or choose how you learn. That is a decision that you need to make for yourself. And that'll do it for me this week. Thank you all so much. Feel free to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next week. Take care.